And we are live on Oz Property Investors. We bring the big names and we have the big fun. And tonight's going to be huge. The audience is 150 people plus registered. Bushy, people wanted more Bush after last Wednesday night. I butchered that opening, so I go get to do it again. How you going, Bushy?
I'm very good, guys. I really enjoyed catching up with Joe last week because we get to talk to each other virtually like this, but it takes it to a different level. We can actually press the flesh. So it was we specifically made the effort just to go to the Geelong exercise so that I could shake Joe's hand.
I'm sorry I wasn't there, Bushy. I will get to one of these events and maybe we'll do another one in Geelong. But
I love
we'll
it.
catch up.
I love meeting friends online, like meeting friends that you've virtually met, because as soon as you meet face to face, it's just like, oh, cool, how's it going? Like nothing has changed. It's like, oh wait, actually, we've never met before. We've never actually met in real life. But yeah, thank you very much for coming out, and thanks for everyone else that came out, because it was an awesome session, and you shared a lot of great and interesting points in the Q&A at the end that I even took note of. I'm like, oh, actually, I need to think about that a little bit more. So thank you.
It was good. I think there was really good sharings all around, and the crew that actually hosted that, Sophie, the property manager, she was really impressive. I thought she'd clearly done a lot of work to get the crew there in person. And I thought conducted a great event, guys. So, just as a bit of reflection, when we first spoke, I reckon it was about 3 years ago when we first spoke, guys. So. It was roughly that. And I think at that time, the membership community was around about 12,000 or something like that. Joe was telling me last week, we're now talking 40-odd thousand. Well, I absolutely take my hat off to you guys. Because you're only able to create a community like that if, one, the information you're sharing is really good. Two, you're creating a community of people who are learning from each other, which is actually pretty rare in the property space because, as you guys know, there's a lot of BS artists in this whole industry. So it's a real credit to you guys. It's it's not easy. Having done similar sorts of things in the past, but not to the level you're doing, I can imagine there's an enormous amount of work you guys are doing behind the scenes to make this all happen. It's almost like a second job to you guys, I would have thought. Full credit to you both, guys. You've building an amazing community, which is going to make a big impact on Australia's future, because those who take the advice and do the work are going to be a lot better off down the track directly as a result of what you've created and what you're sharing.
Thank you, mate. Well, it's people like you that jump on and share the valuable insights. Like I think people underestimate how easy it is to just ask questions, and that's all me and Jeff do here. We're just juicing the brains that come on into the live session. So, mate, you're a part of that. Get ready to get
juiced.
I've got my blindfold cigarette, guys, so I'm ready to get shot at. Far away.
Oh wow! So how you going, Joe? Let's get on track. How you going, Joe? How's your day, man?
Mate,
busy day.
I am ready. I'm ready for tonight. We have the Freedom Formula author, Mr. Bushy Martin. I was catching up and reflecting on some of the insights that we're about to share tonight. But you're in for it. I think what you do incredibly well, Bushy, is you create frameworks for thinking around wealth, knowledge, expertise in the financial space. So it really helps people just encapsulate all of because this is the hardest thing about property investing, is what I found when I started my journey. What happens is the spruikers, the big companies that have hundreds of thousands of dollars, do all of the education. So everyone gets hopped up on that. They're like, yeah, depreciation, off the plans, house and land. That's how I make my money. And it's only when you start to unravel that you start to see the BS. But you do really well in this book. And what's the other? I've got the Freedom Formula. What the other?
Yeah, so Get Invested is the intro. So we basically give that away for free. In fact, for anyone listening tonight who wants a copy, but they just jump on the website, you can just plug in your details and you can download a copy straight away. Or if you want a hard copy, you just pay for the postage and you've got it there. But that's the appetite whetter. Really, I'm really just wanting to wake up and shake up people to the need to invest It's not all about property either, by the way, because I just want Australians to invest in something other than just work and super. And the mistake of thinking that paying off your home is going to get you to where you want to, because it's a pretty sad story if that's what you rely on. So the Get Invested thing is really just to get you excited about it. Then the step-by-step process is really detailed in the full volume of the Freedom Formula, guys.
Well, we'll go deep into that. We'll put it in the little show notes and stuff. Jeff, how are you, mate? How are you today?
I feel very relaxed, Joe. I mean, hearing about the day you had. Yeah, you had a busy one. I've been loading Joel with a lot of things to do, but no, I'm really good. And I was digging into some of the stuff that you've put out there in the last couple of months, Bushy, and just I reflected upon that whole 200K passive income, and just that generated so many people just asking a lot of questions and sort of saying, well, why has he stopped? Like, how did he get there? How long did it take him? And just like, it's a very clickbaity sort of, but I'm very well. But I was reflecting on that, and I was just thinking, yes, it is super impressive. At the same time, I was reflecting on even like Toddy Sloan and how he says you shouldn't idolize, normalize. Like, not to say that what you've achieved isn't fantastic and amazing, but it's like you've actually just created the process and just followed the process. Like one foot, like you put your leg in. How do you put your pants in? One leg at a time. So it's, as we want to sort of demystify some of that sort of stuff, because you are an amazing individual and very talented, but at the same time, I think you are. Yeah, like
you're going to make me blush now, Jeff.
He's going to dispel that myth today. No.
Yeah, I'm going really well. So excited for this session as well. And so shall we get into quotes? Should we talk about what we're going to talk about before we do
quote of the week? No. What's the quote of the week? Bushy, what have you got? What is your quote,
mate, as you know, guys, you know me pretty well. I can't stop at one quote because
we need three.
I put three together that sort of complement each other. So the first one, I reckon you all would have heard before, and it's a Warren Buffett classic, and that is, wealth is the transfer of money from the inpatient to the patient. And I used that one tonight because it's pretty relevant to what I'm going to talk about, because you know what you've just said there, Jeff. The exercise has been 15 to 20 years in the making, mate. So it's not overnight stuff. It's just doing the do and sticking to the knitting that's key. And I'll unpack a lot of that tonight. The second quote is that, and this is more inspirational, and you, again, probably heard this before, but if you don't go after what you want, you'll never have it. If you don't ask, the answer is always going to be no. And if you don't step forward, you'll always be in the same place. So again, that's what I'm saying there, and why I think it's relevant tonight is that people need to actually take action. I see a lot of people in the property space who are gonna, and they end up being, well, we coulda, shoulda, woulda, but they don't actually do anything because they analyse things to death and then actually don't make the move. And there's no such thing as a perfect property. You just need to get in there and learn as you go. I'm not saying be stupid about it and just buy the first property that comes across the board, but take some action is the key. And then the third one, which I think is relevant as well, is that a wise person does it once, what a fool does at last. Both do the same things, they just do them at different times. And it folds back onto what I was saying there in relation to, those that say they're going to do something but never get around to it versus those that take the action and then reap the reward. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that one.
They're solid. There's some solid quotes. You got a whole heap of quotes in your book as well.
All my favourites are in the book, mate. Because
are there people that are alive though? Because did you get copyright for that?
Oh no, I've referenced them. Them. Whoever said them, they're in there. But I don't know about you guys, but I'd like to start my day with a really good quote. It sets the tone for the day for me. And
I used to do a motivational Monday quote. I did it for probably 3 or 4 years on Monday on Facebook, and maybe I should get back into it. But on to that point about people sort of not taking action and just sort of sitting back. I think the other thing is people sort of dwell on what they hadn't done and what the opportunity they missed out on. And by dwelling on that, they've actually then missed out on the next opportunity, because the Sydney boom, for example, 2012, Joe and I kind of missed that a little bit. And then we did miss it. We kind of did miss it. We did miss it. But we said, well, okay, cool. Well, we missed that now. So we're not going to sort of sit around twiddling our thumbs to wait till the next one. We actually took a bit of action and bought a few properties and made a few mistakes here and there and trusted the keys to our financial future with some decisions that weren't fantastic, but we learn a lot from it. So I think, that's another.
That's a very good point, because that's a boom we've just seen. If anyone thinks that we're going to have the past 2 years in the next 2 years, it's not necessarily going to be the case. You need to stop looking for these hot spots and start looking at some more of the fundamentals, in my opinion. But anyway, quote of the week. We're at quote of the week time. My quote actually ties in very nicely with what you were talking about, Bushy, and I thought this one would be very relevant for you. It is, if you think trying is risky, wait until you see the bill for not trying. If you think investing is risky, wait until you get the tab for not investing. That's by Zig Ziglar, and I saw that the other day. And I'm like, perfect. That is so true.
That is a cracker. I just feeding off that one, Joe. In the Freedom Formula, we had a client years ago who came to see us, who was all keen to guess. She was a doctor. She was well heeled. She had good income, great equity. We got her all set up. She was good to go. And then she sort of drifted off. I didn't hear from her for a long time. And I bumped into her about 10 years later. And I said, Margaret, how did you go? She said, well, Bushy, life got a bit busy, and we ended up spending the money that you set up on renovating the house. And but now we're ready. We're ready to invest now.
We're ready.
So I actually sat down and I calculated what she'd missed out on by waiting 10 years to do it. She'd missed $2.4 million in nest egg growth over that period. Wow. And if you amortize that back, for every week she actually delayed investing, it cost her over $4,600 a week.
Wow.
So, wow. The growth is exponential, so it's not linear like that. But just to put some, meaning around the exercise, the cost of delay and the impact of time on your investing, as I'll reveal more tonight, is a big one.
Love it. Yeah, love it. Okay, Jeff, what have you got? What's your quote, mate? And then we'll start chatting.
One's fairly, I wouldn't say unremarkable. I really, I think this guy's an amazing individual, or was an amazing individual. It's by Nelson Mandela, and he said, "It's always impossible until it's done." So
that was very much nearly my quote of the week. So could you?
Yeah. I picked mine probably before yours. I picked mine this afternoon, so maybe not. Yeah. Maybe I've given you not enough credit. Well, but no, I think that I was trying to link it back to that 200K income and just the trials and tribulations that Nelson went through, and Mandela's a kind of somewhat polarizing figure in South African history. But having studied the bloke and been out to Robben Island, like I can't fathom how much kind of trial, how much challenge he went through, and how much sacrifice as well. But he got there in the end. Became the president of South Africa and got a lot of what he was seeking for or looking for.
Well, it's definitely not as hard as property investing is, that's for sure.
Trying to buy a property in Perth, geez.
But anyway, yeah, exactly. Try buying a property in Perth. No comparison. So tonight, what are we going to talk about? We are speaking with Bushy Martin, the man, the myth, the legend of Know How Property and Get Invested podcast. Awesome podcast. Go back to some of the oldest series, and you have an awesome, massive, long intro that Bushy used to do, and he's shortened them down. He shortened them down a little bit. I used to listen to the first part, your intro, for 40 minutes, and then I like, cool. I've got off the train now. I'm going to listen to the next 40 minutes on the way back home for the interview of the people. But so I want to, let's unpack this gentleman's property investing journey, and Jeff is going to do a great intro for us shortly, so you guys can have a bit more context to it. But we're going to unpack, how do you get to a $200,000 passive income portfolio, and what that actually looks like, and the trials and tribulations and fun stuff along the way. So I'm excited for that. But before we do that, we got to jump to our post. So let's do that, and then we'll intro this gentleman. Yeah.
There's nothing worse than going into a situation unprepared, especially when that situation is purchasing one of the most expensive assets of your life against a trained property expert in the form of a real estate agent. It's a scary thought, but it is a skill that can be taught. Do you want to learn how to become fully prepared when buying a property, so you can get out there, buy your dream home or investment property without the fear of actually messing it up? Scott Agate, the founder and expert property negotiator at Hello House, has been helping people buy their properties by stepping in and negotiating with the agents and saving his clients tens of thousands, and in some cases hundreds of thousands of dollars. Scott has now decided to share all that he's learned over the past 28 years in real estate, so you can go out there and do the exact same thing on how to find a property, analyze that property, negotiate on that property, and transact on it to get the best results. He's created the Get Buyer Ready course, which is a step-by-step guide on how you too can become an expert property negotiator. It's the easy way of how you can avoid all of these agent games and get the best purchase price on that dream home or your investment property. The course is in short bites for busy people with no fluff at all. Just all the information you need to get buyer ready and secure that next property with confidence at the best price. Scott has been kind enough to give our community a massive discount with the link below. Sign up today before you even think about putting an offer on that next property, and it will be one of the best decisions you ever make. Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And what I was going to say as well is if anybody has any questions, drop them in and we'll get to them throughout the show. And drop a like, drop a comment, give us a review on Spotify as well, people, or YouTube, do all that sort of stuff. But to Bushy, the person of the hour or 2 hours, depending on how long he wants to chat for. So who is sitting in front of us today? So as Joe's mentioned a couple of times, there's a couple of books that Bushy's written, and they are. I remember reading this back when I was living in Sydney, and I've read a lot of books, but it really resonates. If you've not read a lot of property investing or finance and mindset books, this is like almost a gateway drug to. I'd almost say it as the Australian version, maybe big call here, of Rich Dad Poor Dad, the Freedom Formula. And Get Invested is probably the one that I think I read. So maybe it's a big call. I hope it's okay to say that. Mentor of the Year in South Australia, the Better Business Awards of 2019. And you won some awards for that as well, the Freedom Formula. And you're a top 10 property investment specialist as well. You've got a whole bunch of qualifications. But the thing I love most about you, Bushy, is with your know-how, you've helped over 1,700, so over 1,000 sort of people secure over $600 million in property. So, wow. I mean, how good is that? 600 million. Like that might be a bit old. So have you cracked the billion yet?
Not quite, pretty close to it, actually. That is old, those facts and figures. We're just under 2,000 that we've helped, and just a whisker under a billion. But wow. Yeah, wow. It's been a lot of fun, guys, and that's spread over a long period of time, by the way. I don't take compliments very well. I blush and feel pretty uneasy about it. But it's just doing the do, guys. It's just I really appreciate your thoughts on the book, Jeff. That's probably overstated. But the reality is, I'd just like to get good, truthful, down-to-earth information out there in a way that everyone can understand, because it's not rocket science, the whole property side. A lot of people try and jargonize it to the point where it sounds like it is. But if you break it down and keep it pretty simple, yes, there's some intricacies and some details that you need to learn along the way. But beyond that, it's just communicating it out there in a way that people can actually make use of it, and then most importantly, do something about it.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to say is I wanted to give some credit to your wife, Sonia, as well. I don't sort of think that you would have been able to necessarily do it without her. I mean, I'm not saying that you, but I just wanted, because oftentimes people, underestimate the impact of partners and wives.
Absolutely, and thank you, Jeff. That I will make some noise about it, because there's absolutely no question that the power of two. With Sonia and I, and again, I'll unpack a bit of this tonight, but this is my second crack at a life partnership. I absolutely stuffed it up the first time, and I've got no one else to blame but myself for that. But gee whiz, I struck gold with Sonia, and what she brings to the table, the yin and the yang, when it comes to how we combine as a team. We're on the same page, and what she comes out with and some of the stuff she's able to do. And I'll share a couple of those things tonight. Have been absolutely amazing, mate. So I absolutely kissed on the backside with my life partner, and she's very humble. She runs from the limelight. She's very uncomfortable when the spotlight's on her. So I'm the peacock, and she makes it happen behind the scenes. But there's no way I'd be sitting here talking to you if it wasn't for a massive contribution and partnership that I have with Sonia. She is a living legend.
Yeah, she's amazing. I met you and Sonia as well, and a lot of the back end stuff of what goes on. I see the Sonia's touches every single piece of that, which is awesome. So thank you, thanks Sonia.
Thank you.
Yeah. People are saying, "Go Sonia."
Yeah,
Sonia, Sonia.
Sonia, Sonia. Yeah.
Good John to the Aussie. Bushy, let's wheel this sucker all the way back. So how did you give us a bit of a rundown of how you got into the property investment sphere, or how did the kind of journey begin for you?
Yeah, well, I will go right back, because as I sort of spoke to you in the green room before we kicked off, guys, and I'd interview a lot of investors as well. And if we just focus on the property piece, that's okay. But what we're not sort of getting a handle in is the evolution and the progression of our knowledge, understanding, skills, capacity, the network that we improve, that all has a massive impact on the eventual growth of your portfolio. So I would really like to unpack some of that tonight, right from the get-go. And I'll weave in the personal with the professional with the property side. And I think it'll be a lot more meaningful to those people listening in, because if you isolate the property from what they're doing in life and what perhaps you need to be doing in life to make that journey happen, you're going to miss some of the key learnings, I think. So I appreciate the opportunity to do that, because in reality, guys, my life has actually been in two halves. If I look back on it, it's a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde type of exercise, if you're old enough to know who Jekyll and Hyde is. And I jokingly refer to it as the BC and the AD. So the BC is before my crisis when I was 33, and AD is after the divorce, when I really got serious about the whole property piece. Because in the BC piece, if I look back, I did have a crack at some property in the BC piece when I was in my 20s. But I was really more a trader, speculator, which is code for gambler, if you're being honest about it. And I was much more driven by ego and emotion than I was on, a lot of heart-driven stuff around the property side. Whereas once I got serious about the investment piece, it was a lot more head stuff that started to work it through. So let's go right back. I mean, with a name like Bushy, I'm a boy from the bush, very clearly. That's fairly obvious. So
is that on the birth certificate? Like it's the
No, my good father was the original Bushy. So he had long hair back in the 1930s when it was all short back and side. So everyone called him Bushy Tail, and it became Bushy. And Dad was a living legend. I sometimes get blessed with the family you get born into. He was an absolute cracker. And so I was always Bushy Junior as a kid, as you do. And when he passed, and to sort of maintain his legacy, to be quite honest, because I'm quite proud of what he did and the opportunities that he's given us. I just dropped the junior and kept the Bushy tag. And now every time someone calls me Bushy, I think of Dad. So I'm very blessed with that, guys. But yeah, so country boy, born in a country town. I'm born in a tiny little spot called Groke in Western Victoria. Population of about 300, I think. I think the town almost closed when the family left. I guess why I mention this, it becomes obvious how this influenced things later on, because in reality, I was a punk-chested, flat-faced runt of a kid. So I had a hair lip, and you can still see a bit of the scar there. I can claim it as a boxing scar when I'm with the boys, but it's actually born with a hair lip, and I had really bad asthma. I used to spend all my time in bed. 4 out of 7 days I'd be in bed with asthma, struggling to breathe. So what I do to amuse myself, I used just to draw. I always had a pen in my hand. I was drawing, designing, creating, and I was in one of those typical Aussie families. The old man was a stock agent for a group, and so we moved around country towns all through my childhood. By the age of 40, I'd lived in 40 different places. It became a sort of a gypsy type of an exercise because we're always moving, and that hasn't left me, by the way. I love traveling. I love living in different places to meet new people and enjoy new experiences. But where that led to and where the property piece comes in, during my teens, my good father, he became a land speculator. So he didn't earn much coin in those days. It was pretty tough. But I remember spending a lot of my weekends sitting in the car driving around the place with him. And he was buying blocks of land and then assigning the contracts and selling them before he had to settle on them, so that he could take the improvement and then he'd roll that over. So he did a whole heap of these in a fairly short space of time, and that sowed a little bit of a seed. It was sort of subliminal. It wasn't really active on it, but I was exposed to it, and because I used to draw all the time. And design things all the time. I remember him saying, well, that's all really good, son, but at some stage you're going to have to go and get a real job. So I was like, okay, well, how do I combine my love of drawing and designing with something that's real? Well, I
became an architect.
I'll become an architect. and I've got to say that's about how simple it was. So, I had no background in architecture whatsoever, absolute greenhorn, didn't have a clue. That's the truth of it. But did the 5-year course, was probably smart enough to work with a few builders and put on the overalls and the nail bag and actually learn how stuff was actually done during the process. I became a fairly useful, rather than a lot of architects who are great at drawing things, but when it comes to building it, they're always referred to as effing architects because it's almost impossible to do what they're suggesting. So that was pretty much the start of the exercise. And during that sort of BC piece, the before crisis exercise, I was pretty much like most Australians. I was living for the Australian dream. I went through uni, got a job. I travelled a lot as an architect, so I couldn't get any work in Adelaide at the time when I finished uni. The only things that were being built then and this is at the end of the 70s, early 80s, so I'm showing my vintage now, guys. But the only thing that was happening then was gravestones, pretty much. It was a dying population in Adelaide at the time.
They stopped building churches in Adelaide by that time?
Well, they needed more churches and funerals, mate. That was about it. But I went and worked. In fact, I worked for free for a stretch in Adelaide just to get some experience. But I got a job with a crocodile skin farmer up in New Guinea, who decided that he was making big money and he wanted to get into property development, and he's sick of paying architectural firms, so he thought he'd employ his own in-house architect to do his work. So I went up there gung-ho. I call it my Indiana Jones days because the only people that go to PNG, and this is in the 80s, were mercenaries, missionaries, or madmen. And I'm still trying to work out which category I fitted into. But I spent a couple of years up there, and this guy made a fortune selling crocodile skins to the French and Japanese, and then pouring all the money into property development. So I did a heap of residential development in Port Moresby, and we did a tourism safari lodge in a beautiful spot called Tufi. Once I'd finished there, I went to Darwin. And it was boom time in Darwin. There was a lot of work happening at that point in time. And I spent a couple.
Was this the late 80s? Was it, or early 90s?
This is still in the 80s, and it's when I hit Alice Springs that I actually got into property for the first time.
So you were already seeing people profiting and benefiting from property investing and property developing, and you were pretty much putting together the plans and the structures and like. Yeah, this one works. This one looks good. It's super affordable, and you can build it. And here it is. I've saved you, $100K. And then they're like, "Great, thanks. Here's your pennies, and I'll go build it and make my money."
Spot on. And there's the danger. I thought I knew more than I actually did, because there's a lot of difference between drawing it and designing it and building it and making a coin. And so my first entourage into the property space from a personal perspective, and this was early 80s, we did a 1-4 redevelopment in Alice Springs. There was myself and just start listening to this because this is a combination from hell. So myself and 2 others plus a developer come builder. We all went in it together. We didn't sit down and really think about exit strategies in any detail. Because we were good architects and there's some pretty average stuff being done in Alice Springs, our view was that we would build this Taj Mahal that was going to be so much better than everything else and stand out and win all sorts of awards that people would fall over themselves to pay lots of money for it. Dumb idea. So that was our first mistake. And again, it took about 18 months for these things to go from inception to completion, and the market had completely changed over that time. So, the asking price of what we needed to get out of them wasn't even close to what people were prepared to pay. So
this is your first foray into actually owning your. How did you decide to actually do that? Like, what was?
It just seemed like a good idea at the time. As you said, Joe, how hard can this be? I'm seeing all these guys doing it, and we're drawing it and designing it and project managing it. Gee whiz, this can't be that difficult. Why should we make these guys all this money? We'll go out and have a crack. Gee whiz, that was a baptism of fire. Because not only have we misread the market, and I'm talking curved roofs, and we went to town on this thing. It was a thing of beauty. There's no question about it.
Overcapitalized a little bit.
It would have won the awards if it got up.
What a disaster! It got finished, and I actually had a look today. It's still going pretty well. It's at number 1 Mill Street in the east end of Alice Springs. Still looks good. It looks good, but in terms of its property performance, it's a dog. So we couldn't sell it. So we had to put tenants in to rent it to try and bridge the bleeding hole that was developing because it cost us a bomb. We borrowed every cent to do this thing because you couldn't those days.
Well, at least you had 4 people to spread the load with,
Yeah, wait for it, because we had no definitive exit strategy other than we'll build them and sell them. That was the exit strategy. Okay, so mistake number 1. So then once it got ugly, one of the other partners got divorced, and of course that created a lot of issues because we then were forced to sell a couple of the properties, and the developer that we went into bed with went bankrupt. So it was an absolute disaster. There's no doubt about it.
It's interesting. Like this story was talking about in the 80s. This story could be happening today. Like it's the same. It's human nature, right? It's people that should be and shouldn't be doing things.
We really didn't do our due diligence. We didn't do any risk assessment. We just thought we knew it. And that's sort of an ego. I said earlier that it was ego driven to some degree and emotionally driven because we weren't really running the numbers. We missed the boat by a mile. So we didn't read what sort of accommodation the market needed. We therefore didn't price it the right way. We didn't deliver it the right way. It was doomed before it started, to be perfectly honest. So a massive learning early on. And this might sound silly, but my biggest mistakes have created my biggest learnings. And it might sound crazy, but mistakes are actually big lessons in the making. So I don't mind making mistakes because you're forced to have to learn. The mistake that a lot of people make, though, I think, is they'll make a mistake like that and they'll never go back. They'll wash their hands and probably walk away and never do it again. Rather than go, well, okay, what did we do wrong? What do we need to do differently? And I've seen
it with generational. I've seen generations of people that did that exact situation. Oh, no, my parents had a terrible experience with property investing. I'm like, have you tried it? Because you've got excess capital and you're putting all this money and it's just sitting in the bank account. Like, what are you doing? Well, property's not for me. So, you're kind of looking at that and it's not.
I've actually seen it. I've seen it with a good friend of mine. And he's sort of, because his dad invested in sort of town, like some those vacation sort of stay places, and just absolutely had destroyed him financially. And then he decided that the property wasn't for him. But through chatting to him, he's decided to get back on the property bandwagon and has done okay. Probably done even better than me, actually.
Well, it's very compelling if you do your homework on what property can do, and given the incentives we enjoy in this country, there's no better asset vehicle to build wealth. There's no question.
Have you got any tips for like partnerships, like some of the key learnings that you got from the partnerships that didn't work out?
100%. Have a watertight shareholders agreement right from the get-go that spells out what all of the potential exit strategies are. And all of the what ifs. What are the what ifs? If I get hit by a bus, what do we do? If there's a crash in the property market and they're vacant for months, what do we do? If the properties are damaged, what do we do? Inculcate all of those into a JV come shareholders agreement, and do that while you're friends and while you still love each other before you've done anything, because then when it gets ugly, then you can pull it off the shelf and all the hard decisions are made. And that paid dividends later on too, by the way, because in one of my future business exercises, which I'll talk a little bit about, we did exactly that. And when it got to the point where we decided we were going to go separate ways, we just dusted it off, pulled it down, executed, and we're all still mates and all still catch up. So very, very different scenario. So it's the old story: build stuff on paper first before you do anything at all. And this applies not only to the arrangements you have with other parties, but the way you do property as well. If I look back now, everything we do now, we'll build it on paper right down to the last dollar and work out what the cash flow is going to be in year 1, 3, 5, 10, 15 and beyond before we even get serious about making offers on properties. So
you got us to the end part of the journey, Joe. You got us to that stage.
Yeah, well, and I'm going to bounce around a fair bit here. So that was number one, and I was a what you call a rent investor now. There was no such term in those days, of course, because I was just renting in Alice Springs. But not long after that, I went down to Adelaide to open an architectural practice in partnership with a guy from Alice Springs, because we couldn't get staff in Alice Springs, but it was easy to get architects in Adelaide and do work in Alice Springs. So I went to Adelaide. I got married in a massive hurry, as you do when you're young and stupid. And I ended up buying my first home not long after that. That was in Glynde in Adelaide. And I'm just trying to remember numbers there. I reckon I picked up that property. And again, this was an emotionally driven purchase. So
was it
fell in
PPOR?
love with. Yes. Yep. It was. It didn't become that, by the way, because I ended up bouncing around. So we live in it for 3 months, I think, and then I got posted back to Alice Springs. So we used the 6-year rule, where it can still be your PPOR, but we lived in Alice and then managed to sell it without capital gains because
was the Northern Territory booming this much, where the majority of your work as an architect was happening up there?
Yeah, I mean, it appealed to me. Yes, there was a lot of work. I mean, Alice Springs was going through a massive boom during the 80s. Post-Cyclone Tracy in Darwin and then the flow through to Alice, there was a lot happening. And I ended up being the project architect for Ayers Rock Resort. And I actually lived out at Ayers Rock Resort for about 2.5 years.
Was that Yulara, was it?
Yeah, Yulara, yeah. So we created all of the...
I've been there.
Yeah, Desert Sails, the Outback Pioneer, the Desert Gardens. I know that place like the back of my hand. As a consequence of basically being in the red dirt for a couple of years. But we bought this little property in Adelaide, and again, an emotionally driven exercise. And actually, I'm going to step back. Before I do that, because I've forgotten one important piece in the property journey, that thanks to my good father, because my father had been very involved in the land exercise, after that disaster with the Sturt Apartments exercise, he encouraged me, together with my brothers, to set up a trust and buy some land. So we bought some land. It was about 1984, I think we bought this land, and it was bare earth, basically on the edge of a little town called Wollonga, south of Adelaide.
Wollonga.
Yeah,
it
was quite big. There was I think we had around about 150 hectares or thereabouts. It's a big piece of dirt, but agricultural land at that time, it was dirt cheap. I mean, it was dirt cheap, and it had a number of titles on it. So the idea was, because Dad had just seen what I'd done on my own and burnt a heap of cash. So he said, son, it's about time you wake up to yourself. Let's land bank some stuff that you can eventually, when you get yourself in the right position, build a home on down the track. So and I'm going to come back to this, because I was a bit reluctant to get involved with that exercise, to be honest, but after what I'd just been through.
150 hectares is massive as well.
It was big, and we just ran a few cows and sheep on it to keep it down. We managed to secure some heritage grants, and we actually planted 110,000 trees to regreen the whole thing, because it was pretty much bare earth. So we absolutely regreened the exercise, but it wasn't really much of an income operation, because we ran a few cows and sheep and adjusted a bit of stuff just to pay the council rates, basically. But it was a sleeper. It was a sleeper, and again, I'm going to just park that one, because we'll come back to that, because I'd pretty much forgotten about it, to be perfectly honest. And then so fell in love, got married in a hurry. We bought this little place in Glynde. It was on a 568 square metre block, so tiny. It had actually been carved off one of the Italian garden farmers' blocks. It was a 1950 build. It was beautiful. It was a little cozy cottage. It was a very romantic purchase. But as you know, you don't buy pretty properties because they're generally not profitable. And I think we bought that. I bought it after auction, so I went to the auction and I waited to get passed in, and then I went and negotiated after the event. And we picked it up for 98 grand. This is back in 1987. And then, of course, when my life went to poo in the early 90s, we sold it. We were forced to sell it because I got divorced at that stage, and I think we only sold it for 120 grand. So we didn't make much out of that exercise. But again, it was an emotional buy. So I'm going to reinforce some of the mistakes you make. You don't go for what looks good. You don't go for what feels good. You start to look at the numbers and what else is driving this exercise. So bit of a mistake. We managed to get out of it. I reckon we probably would have lost money with the buying cost and the selling costs. 98 to 120 grand. There was no money. Yeah. There's no question about that. So that was the third property, and then I continued to travel. So I ended up back in Alice for a stretch. Then I went to Bangkok, and I opened an office for an international design firm over there. Then I came back to Perth and ran the office for the crowd there. I got very busy, but I was pretty much living the Australian dream at that stage. So work hard, focus on your career, earn a decent income, worked on some great projects. I mean, it looked great. No dramas about that. But
what was Perth like in the 90s? Like, was it?
Yeah, I love Perth. I mean, when you're coming from Alice Springs and Asia, Perth, it looks like a palace. I actually love Perth. I think it's a great city, actually.
I've still never been, but I'll get there one of these days.
Yeah,
I've been to 6 continents and I haven't been to Perth.
Hey, well, make sure you go. It is a great city. It's a very positive. That resource culture, the mining culture, is a very gung ho, let's get it done culture. If I compare that with Adelaide's a very conservative, old school gentry exercise. Where versus Victoria, where I was born, which is very much a convict place. There is still the old signs of that. Adelaide's very much about which school you went to, where Perth is more about let's get it done and we'll talk about it after. Whereas Adelaide, let's talk about it forever and then maybe we'll do something. There is a difference.
See that about Perth. I can relate.
Yeah. So I love Perth, and my brother's still over there. He lives down at Margaret River, so we get over there reasonably often, and great climate. I love Perth. It's a great spot. But reality was I was a workaholic by that stage. I'm a closet perfectionist anyway, and which is my biggest challenge, to be honest. And it's good to a point, but it has its downsides. And the downside for me was that I was working 7 days a week, 14 hours a day, and I did that for years on end. And then, no surprise, I burnt my marriage, and then the whole house of cards fell over. Because I ended up losing my career, I ended up losing my marriage. I had my son at that stage, so that was a massive wake up call for me. Because being a country boy, you sort of brought up with one church, one wife, and one bank. That's pretty much the way you come into the world. And when your marriage goes, that was pretty shameful for me, to be perfectly honest. And I couldn't blame anyone but myself. So I often joke, but I spent the next 2 years doing my master's in business, but that was an excuse to hide from the world where I did a lot of mirror time. And I really started to think about, well, what do I need to be doing differently from this point on? Because the model was very much work hard, stick money in the super, have a nice house, and then tick off the bucket list when you retire. And that's a fairly common thing. I hadn't thought about it too much, to be honest. But when the whole thing fell over, it was like, righto, well, what are you going to do differently? And I was determined to make a massive change. Now, about the same time as this, by the way, my old man, who'd always been my role model, I always looked up to Dad. His health started to fall to bits, and he had a bunch of strokes. He had bowel cancer, and he was one of those Aussies that she'll be right, mate. Just blunder on. Don't worry about it. And I'll never forget him looking me in the eye, but not long before he passed, and he said, "Son, it's about time you learnt from me. Stop following my example. Stop working for money and start getting money to work for you." It was like a light bulb moment. It really shook me up, to be perfectly honest. It really shook me to the core. And that stayed with me. And it's funny how these things happen in threes, but a mate of mine from Alice Springs who'd come down to Adelaide dragged me along to a Robert Kiyosaki conference in Adelaide. Robert Kiyosaki was actually there. I was like, okay, I'll come along. I don't really have much interest, but yeah, if you're shouting me a ticket, I'll go and have a listen. And again, massive penny drop moment. Because he said the moment the passive income becomes a part of your life will change forever. And it was almost like I'd taken off a set of glasses and I could see the world completely differently from that point on. So I grabbed his book, I grabbed his board game, the cash flow game. I just immersed myself in this stuff. And the good thing about that experience was that the way we approach everything now, from that point on, everything we did in investing, everything we did in terms of our work, career, and business was based on three key things. So everything we did had to create an income stream, it had to grow in value, and it had to be saleable. So if those three things weren't present in everything we looked at, then we walked away. So that got us really thinking, and I'd met Sonia by this stage, and being the architect, I was very good at visualising what the future looks like, and then working out what steps we need to take to get from where we are to where we want to be. So we sat down at a little restaurant in Clarendon. It's a beautiful spot just south of Adelaide on a Sunday afternoon with a burning fire in the background, and I said, okay, we're going to paint out our future. So I wrote down what life is going to look like in 10 years, and I wrote my perfect day. She wrote a letter to a mother based on what we were doing at that time, and then we compared notes, and we got really crystal clear about exactly how we wanted to live. And again, by coincidence, really, or serendipity, whatever you want to call it, the guy who ran the restaurant was an accountant. And he only opened this restaurant when he liked. He'd set himself up. He'd been an active investor himself, this guy, which I didn't realise at the time, but we found out later. And he was poking his head over all the time as he was pouring the wine, saying, "Yeah, what are you guys up to?" And so we explained what we're up to, and he said, "Look, I can help you monetize that. I can help you work out how much that lifestyle costs." So he did exactly that. We actually worked it out. And then he'd had a little bit of financial planning background as well. So he said, look, to get to that income, you're going to need to create this level of income producing assets. And that pretty much became the seeds of what we now help others do with what I call the freedom forecast or the freedom numbers. So just to share those numbers with you, I want to be totally open with.
And this is what you wrote down on the table, like all those years ago.
Stuff. I mean, you can actually, on the back wall behind me, you can probably see my vision board. Just near the duck on my screen. I can see it. Yeah. I mean, it's a bit hard, but I'm a very, very visual person, so I had everything down there. Everything was important to me. Singing with Sting is still up there. I haven't ticked that box, but I've ticked most of the others because I'm a closet muso. But the income levels, the types of properties we're living in, the travel, all of that stuff was a big part of that. And where we got to was $200,000 a year. Now I know one of the questions that came through on the Q&A that you put out for the session tonight, Jeff, was why stop at 200? I want to ask, I want to pose a question to those listening: how much is enough? Because if you get clear on how much is enough, we'd worked it out. We'd worked out and we live pretty simply, by the way, guys. A country boy, I enjoy the simple fare. I like a coffee in the morning. We walk our dogs. I do a bit of exercise. Might like to go out for a feed once a week, and we like to travel. That's not an expensive.
Up every now and then.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not an expensive lifestyle. I don't think it needs to be that lavish. If you really spend some time working out how much you need to live comfortably the way you want to, then it's not generally a massive number. So
especially when you factor out like how much transport costs is, like how like you're buying all this nice clothes for work. Do you actually enjoy a 3-piece suit or whatever it is? You can really start to look at the reduction of costs that you can have if you're just living.
And I suppose the other thing when you sort of say 200K, like that's some of that's from property sort of income, or probably, I don't know how much of it is, but a good majority is from property investments. So you'd sort of say that rents are going to increase. So the rents have gone up by 10 to 15% or whatever. I mean, generally. So that's not going to stay at 200K.
Yeah, spot on. It's exactly right. So lifestyle, the inflation over time affects that number. There's no question. But I do want to challenge the listeners to spend some time working out exactly how you want to live, and then put a budget around that figure. You'll be very pleasantly surprised, I suggest, because I see a lot of investors chasing property for the sake of money. And when you say, well, how much money, what for, you often get crickets. So I was determined to get really crystal clear on this is how we want to live, how are we going to fund that, how much do we need to fund that, and that then transposes into the other freedom number. So I call it our lifestyle income. If our lifestyle income was 200 grand a year, that means, a 5% net return, we needed to create a income producing nest egg of around $4 million at that stage. That was our thinking. And our plan was to do that in 15 years. I thought, well, 15 years is a reasonable period. I now know from years of experience that you should be investing for a minimum of 15 years anyway, I believe. And there's a lot of people smarter than me that have done the same research that confirms that if you look at property cycles going back 45 years, then the average time to go through a full property cycle is 15 years. So if you're investing for any less than that, then you might hit your goals, but it's probably going to be more by good luck than good management.
Can I ask you? We've still got going a little bit off the story track here, and maybe Joe might have asked as well. But how much do you look at sort of the property cycle sort of side of things when you're buying or when people are buying assets? Like, do you look at it much, or you focus more on the deal?
Yeah, well, it's a factor to consider. I think there's a whole heaps of pieces to the jigsaw here. And we'll get to my approach to the whole research piece in detail later on. But because I think, and here's an important thing about that, because I'm guessing that part of your thinking around this is the timing of the market piece, Jeff.
Because for example, if somebody bought in Perth in 2010, for example, there's sort of people that have bought that are only just now, like, looking at some myself, they're only just now starting to get to where they were worth then. So imagine that's close to 15 years, like 10, 12 years. So
spot on. Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the key things that, and I'm glad you raised this, Jeff, because this is a very valid point for me. I see a lot of investors, whether it be in equities or property, trying to time the market. I think there's a bit of folly in that. You can try and tilt the deck in your favor by looking at some leading edge indicators in terms of infrastructure, industry, and growing incomes that are going to at least give you a better chance. But there's no guarantees, because you don't know it's the bottom until after the event. You don't know it's at the top until after the event. But the important thing here, and this is something I want to really emphasize, if you're investing for the long-term horizon of 15 years plus, then the timing doesn't matter so much, because if an area is going to go through its full cycle over that 15 years, then you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
It desensitizes the need to have to buy at the bottom and sell at the top.
So did you know, when you were writing down this kind of freedom number and freedom, well, maybe not the formula, that because you created that afterwards, did you know the how you were going to get there? Or were you saying, no, this is the dream lifestyle that we are wanting to create. This is what we want. This is where we want to be. And then let's go figure out the how. Is that kind of how it
Absolutely. It's, again, this was probably subliminally the architect in me. It's really get vivid and clear on what the end exercise looks like, and then work out how we're going to bridge the gap. So, but the starting point, given what I'd just been through, and guys, to emphasise this, at 33, I was on the bones of my backside. I got out of the marriage with a beaten up old Toyota and a bunch of cassettes. That was it. At 33.
What were the cassettes? Were they like motivational ones?
Most of them were knockoff pirates from Bali anyway, but they were, it was a ground zero moment for me. So I wanted to get motivated again. I wanted to get excited around what the future looks like, because I'd just seen the house of cards collapse. And it's like, okay, I've just been through a car crash. I need to pick myself up here and really get inspired and motivated. And again, the important piece here, Sonia and I did this together. And one of the other small messages I want to impart here is that I get to see a lot of investors who one party's gung-ho, the other one couldn't care less, or worse, is scared the hell out of it. That's a recipe for disaster, because it will self-sabotage down the track if you're not both on the same pathway.
I got a couple of questions off the back of this. Sorry, just so many things are popping through my head. So with that sort of with that thing where you had that sort of crisis point, do you think you would be where you are today if that had not have happened? I mean, hard to have that counterfactual.
No, I guarantee I wouldn't be. Absolutely guarantee I wouldn't be, because the reflection and the work that I did both on myself and what I needed to change at that point, I hadn't had the reason to do that up until then. I would have just kept on keeping on. I'm sure I would have. I might have come to a realization down the track, but probably too late. I had to get off my backside. I mean, this is at 33, starting again, absolutely starting again. When I thought I was going to be a hero by the time I was 30, that was a massive wake up call for me. And I joke about it now, but I did more work with psychologists and counselling after my marriage went belly up than I did before, because it was like, well, what do I need to do differently? Because the unfortunate reality with life, guys, is it doesn't matter what we do and where we go, we take ourselves with us. And which means that we're at least 50% of the problem, and probably more at times. So if we're not prepared to have a really good look at ourselves in the mirror and look at, okay, what do we need to be doing differently in terms of our thought, our actions, then we're just going to keep repeating the same mistakes. So that reflection was really important, and I'm an avid reader. So one of the take homes that I really want to encourage people to do, the first thing you need to invest in, which everyone listening to this is doing right now, is investing in their knowledge. Because here's the simple equation: the more you know, the less fear you have, the more comfortable you are, and the more you're able to take on. So invest in your knowledge at every turn. Talk to as many people as you possibly can. Read as much stuff as you possibly can. There is no one size fits all with property, as we all know. There's 1,000 different pathways to get to the end destination. But part of that exercise is at least experiencing enough of them to go, this is the one that feels right for me, where I'm at, what my risk profile is, and what my capacity is.
Yeah. And it's great to learn from people's mistakes as well. You've gone through a number of mistakes that you've made. And it's just like, great that, you've taken the bullet for us, so we don't have to go down that journey and that path of, hey, we now have to, let's do a development with 4 friends, and that's going to be great. One's
first investment.
Yeah, one does this, one owns a pet farm, the other one does something else. And it's like, we're not adding value to this situation, and we haven't got it structured correctly. But if you do get it structured correctly, like I've got partnerships where I've got, we find the deal, he runs the deal. I find the deal, he runs the deal. I find it. It's like, great. That's synergy. That works because everyone has their piece of the puzzle, but it's written down. We know exactly, Joe, you do this. Your job is this. You do this. You do this. And it makes a lot more sense. So yeah, you can learn from people's amazing results, but I love to learn from the lessons because they're the ones that trip you up. You don't learn much from, hey, I did this thing and I did really well. You learn a lot from, mess this up, and this is how I learned from it, so you don't have to do it again.
Spot on. It's the wounds that leave the scars that remind you of the things you need to do differently. There's no question about that, and they're much more poignant when that occurs. So totally agree. And picking up on your point there, Joe, given the environment we're now moving into, where for some period of time now, the lending environment is going to be pretty tight. And again, we'll talk about this more during the Q&A. But people are going to have to get creative. The same old isn't going to necessarily perform moving forward. So you need to think outside the square. You need to get creative. You still need to do all that due diligence. And going back to the shareholders agreements that we now, everything I've done since then, every time we go into any form of joint activity with someone, it's documented within an inch of its life. Because that way, when the what ifs do occur, and they inevitably do, the one thing that we all know about property, it's not a matter of if a problem is going to occur, it's just a matter of when and how bad it's going to be. That's as simple as it gets. So that was pretty key. So getting crystal clear on those numbers, and again, part of that exercise, that this accountant come financial planner come restaurateur at Clarendon. He was really good, actually. When I think back on it, it was very fortuitous that he happened to be there at that time. But he also did the old what we now call the do nothing different projection. And he said, okay, tell me how much super you got, what do you got in shares, blah blah. Okay, well, if 15 years is where you want to be, this is, if you don't do anything differently, this is where you're going to end up. And we were going to end up surviving on about 32 grand a year. And I was like, okay, that's motivating. Clearly, we need to do something, and to this day now, the Freedom Forecaster that we've now developed around this whole process, that's the first thing we do with people that we talk to put some shape around. Well, you may not need to invest if we project forward based on your current asset base. If that's going to give you what you need, then you don't need to do anything. But if there's a gap between that and where you want to be, what is that gap, and then what do we need to do to bridge the gap? And that tends to start driving the strategy. So, I hear a lot of people talking about property strategy, but I think they're missing the point in the context that you've got to get your lifestyle strategy first, then complement that with your finance strategy to look at what your capacity is and your capability to bridge the gap to make that happen. And then the property strategy will fall out of the bottom of those two. So life first, finance second, property third.
What do you say is your life? What forms part of the lifestyle strategy? Is that like, do you want to go overseas twice a year? Do you want to upgrade your car? Is that what a lifestyle?
Exactly. Spot on. That's exactly it. So we like to travel 3 months of the year. We do that. We couldn't do it during COVID, obviously, but we're back on that horse now, and that's a big part of it. I love to play hockey. I love to play piano. There's a whole bunch of stuff that Sonia and I we're mad about our Samoyed dog rescues. That they're a big part of our life. We got we rescue Samoyed dogs.
Dog rescues.
Big fluff balls. They are beautiful. Google it, mate. They are the most beautiful dogs you are ever going to come across, mate. They are the best nature.
What type of dog is it?
Samoyeds. They're pure white. They've got permanent smiles on their face. They don't.
Oh yeah, it's those big fluffy things. Oh.
Yeah, Samoyeds. Yeah, they're Southern Russian, I think, by background. But we rescue them now. We rescue old Samoyeds. The last two we got. Yeah, that's it. That's Samoyeds. You got it. They are absolutely drop dead gorgeous and beautiful natured. They just, whenever I'm having a hard day, all I've got, my dog comes in and he smiles at.
Just can't be upset looking at that kind of dog.
Yeah. They are awesome. So, but I digress. So coming back to that, it's getting crystal clear around exactly how you want to live, and I mean getting down to what's your perfect day, week, month, year look like. And this may change, by the way, because once you've done your freedom numbers, then the important thing from there is to use it as a magnet in terms of getting excited about where you're heading, but also to use it as a measuring stick because you can check in every 12 to 18 months and see how you're progressing against it. Has it changed? Do you need to change the number? How's your portfolio progressing towards it when you project it out to make sure then you're actually tracking the performance of what you're doing to where you want to be. So getting crystal clear on that's really important.
So now we've painted the picture, right? So we know where we're going to go. Like, how did you actually make it a reality? Like, how did you connect the dream world to the real world?
Perfect. Yeah, exactly right. So now we're inspired. Now we're fired up. We've got and I was one of those nutcases. I've got the vision board's there, but I recorded it on the phone. I used to listen to it in the shower because I remember I was actually clinically depressed when my marriage went belly up. They had me on Prozac there for a period. So I wasn't a very happy chap. So I was looking for anything to get really motivated and inspired about it. So I went overboard. There's no question about it. But the number of people that I get to talk to when I ask the question, so what's your ideal life look like? I get crickets most of the time. I get, I've never really thought about that, actually. Well, if you're not clear on where you're heading, you could end up anywhere. That's the challenge.
That's what the Cheshire Cat said to Alice.
Which path? Where do you want to go? I don't know. Well, any path will take you there.
That's exactly spot on, guys. Spot on. So sort of now that we've got the GPS, and it is a GPS, it's not a roadmap because you tend to change direction a bit. But if you're still guiding towards where you want to be, then that really does lead you. And the really good thing about that as well is that then means if you know where you're heading, then every decision you're making day to day is based on, is it taking me closer to that or further away? So you've got a basis to be making decisions against.
That definitely changes the assets that you are buying, and then all of a sudden this crypto exciting NFT that's just been created. Well, is that taking me closer to, or is that taking me further away? Super interesting.
Absolutely. And the really critical thing there, Joe, following on, expanding on what you're saying there, is that what became crystal clear to us right from the get-go. I mean, we had to remember we were looking to create a $4 million income-producing nest egg from day one. Well, where our focus needed to be: growth.
Yeah.
With nothing, it had to be all about growth.
So capital growth, is it?
100%. Whatever we invested in had to be, and those three things: income producing, growth, saleable. So we had our template in our head pretty much, and we started looking at the world through those glasses, if you like. So what do we do then? And you're absolutely right. So remember, we had very little capital at that point in time. So what did I do? I cobbled together $5,000, and I went and spent it on a technical share trading course to trade in CFDs.
Okay. We probably took the same course, Bushy. I mean, okay. My manual's over there on the shelf, and I haven't touched it. I didn't trade.
There you go. Well, I leapt into that. I leapt into it in a big way because it's like, how can I go from very little capital base to try and build one reasonably quickly? And I jumped at CFDs. That their leverage is 100 to 1. I was trading the indices at that point. And a high risk strategy, guys. It's when I look back on it,
don't try this at home, kids.
No, I wouldn't recommend anyone do it, actually, because it was a roller coaster ride. There were times when I would lose $30,000 overnight, just like that.
Wow,
$30,000. Once I got
money,
rolling,
right?
Yeah, it's serious money. It was a real roller coaster ride. And I was having to spend, what I hadn't worked out was I had to spend about at least 4 hours a day doing, because I was day trading effectively. So a couple of hours before the open and a couple of hours after and around the close is where I was putting it. And it's not for me. It's not my cup of tea, because if you're staring at the screen that long, you start wanting to make it happen, and then you start making some really dumb decisions.
And the problem is a lot of it's out of that sort of thing. A lot of it's out of your control. Like there could be like a major news event, or there's hundreds of different kind of news things that come out, and that you can't predict what, and you might not even know that news event's happening. So it's just
spot on. Very volatile. You can put all the guaranteed stop losses and everything else in place and still get burnt, which is at some of the hard lessons I learned during that. But I managed to get through that with enough to get our first deposit on our first property, because I've been
That's the biggest thing as well. I think that is sometimes understated is like you have to get that first nut. You need that first, however you get that first deposit is just hard graft. There's no other way around it. You have to just do some crazy stuff to be able to get that first thing, and then you can start leveraging into that. Before I want to dig into that and understand that a little bit more. Before we do that, we got to jump to our ad. But after that, let's unpack how do we actually how do we actually get to this number, and what were your steps? What did the steps look like for you?
Perfect.
The amazing thing with commercial property investing is that in most cases it's cash flow positive from day one, which means that you can drive those profits towards paying down the debt. There are instances with commercial property investing where you can actually have the property pay itself off over 10 years, which is absolutely crazy. With commercial property, you get massive net yields, so you can expect anywhere between 6 to 10%. And as we've seen in the current boom, these properties not only provide large cash flow, they do certainly grow wildly in value too. Now, with big rewards comes some risk, and this is why you should de-risk your investment as much as possible. And the way you do that is with expert due diligence. And this is why we highly recommend people hire professionals to help you along in your investing journey. Steve Polisi of Polisi Property is one such expert. Being a chartered mechanical and structural engineer in a past life, Steve draws on his analytical and mathematical skills to do that expert due diligence for you. With 6 years experience in the space, Steve has over 1,200 property transactions under his belt. He's the guy you want in your corner, crunching the numbers and finding the best properties in the best locations, along with ensuring that you avoid the mistakes. Steve has actually even written a book on commercial property investing in Australia, and not only is it a bestseller, I believe it to be the most comprehensive in commercial property investing on the market today. He's been generous enough to give us a massive discount for our audience of 50%. So use the code OZPROP, click the link below, get a copy today, and start learning and getting on your commercial property investing journey.
I tell you what's impressive about tonight is there's people are really rolled in because Origin is on. I mean, Scotty Agate couldn't make the live tonight because he was watching the game, which yeah. So and Fleasy's having a discount at the moment. I see as well. He's trying to get people in. I've got an email about it, so he's spammed me about that. So gotta love Fleasy. So we're talking about a framework and
let's get into the guts of the BC, the AD, the after divorce exercise when I got serious about investing properly. Because after the CFD exercise and we managed to cobble together enough to get into our first property, then the other thing that I just want to mention with this, one of the things we realised early is that to achieve that sort of nest egg, we also needed to have pretty good incomes up front. So I've been an architect before. I jumped on board with an executive recruiting group in Adelaide and did some executive contracting for them. Back into government because I'd done some work with government before, and there was a really good income stream that came out of that. Sonia worked her way through the ranks to run a recruitment business in Adelaide as well. So that was horsepowering. We knew that we had to get reasonably sized incomes to be able to generate enough cash to try and build the base. But we also realised fairly early on, and this became an important part of our strategy as well, is that when you're both working solidly in your jobs, there's not a lot of time to be able to dedicate to the wealth piece. If you're trying to fit it in a couple of hours at night on the weekends, then that's a risk in itself.
Yeah, I always say if like property investing, and this is why Jeff and I created this entire community, you can do it. If you put a full-time effort into this property game, you can absolutely do it. The challenge that people get into is when they put a part-time effort in and they expect a full-time result. That's where you start to see people cutting corners and making mistakes and things like that. You put a full-time effort into something, you'll get a full-time result. And this is where your team comes in handy. This is why you need to create yourself a solid team that is thinking about you, and that those team members need to be communicating together as well, because your solicitor or conveyancer, all they're thinking about is how do we de-risk this situation. Your accountant is thinking, how do I reduce tax? Your mortgage broker is thinking, how can we increase income, which is kind of against the tax situation, because if you're making income, then your buyer's agent's looking for something else, and it's trying to get everyone together on the same page of like, this is this, on the same strategy piece. How do you do that? How do you actually? How do you do that?
Said. Well, and you're absolutely right, and I would reinforce everyone doing that, being the dumbest person in the room, but knowing enough to be able to manage your managers is the key now. Back in those days, and you do have to, don't outsource responsibility of your portfolio to someone else. Yeah. And what I mean by that is definitely have the best player in each position as part of your team, but you must at least invest in enough knowledge to be able to understand what they're saying and what it means. So you have to do that work. But coming back to my situation at that point, given I'd been burnt badly in the property exercise, you can guess where I was. I didn't trust anyone, and I thought that I could do it better myself. Right. So the conundrum we had was, well, how do we do this? So we actually, and it sort of evolved over time, but we decided that one of us would be the worker and one would be the wealth builder. So we both wanted to have careers, and I wanted to spend a fair bit of time with my son for my first marriage at that stage, because I was like the good time uncle for a fair period of time there in that situation. So what we consciously decided to do was that early on, when I was day trading, Sonia was going hard in the recruitment business and doing very well. Once we got to a point where we got into our first property, then it was a couple of properties actually. I'm going to weave this story because one of the frameworks that evolved from this, and again, reflection's easy, so it's easier to see it now than what we were doing then. But because we did, I call it the money medicine. So you've probably seen that Olympic bike race where there's a pair of riders riding against another pair of riders. And one rider is up on the top of the track, sort of taking it easy, while the other one's going hell for leather for 2 laps. And then the other guy
Kieran, isn't
it? It's a what?
The Kieran, isn't it? I think.
No, it's actually called the Madison. It's called the Madison.
Oh, Madison.
So they do this slingshot, and then they change over, and the other guy has a rest while the other rider goes hell for leather. So we got this thought in our head that if one is earning the income and the other one's building the wealth, so we've got the worker and the wealth builder, then we've got the best of both worlds. We've got enough income that's generated, but then we've actually got someone who's got the time to dedicate it. So my initial dedication on that was into the CFD stuff. So I did that full time for a period. And then we kept switching over. Because as we were horse powering our property portfolio, we both wanted to have a career, but he also wanted to have some time out. So I then went back into government, and I managed the health portfolio for the South Australian government, and it was pretty good coin at that stage, because at that point we realised, again, using that template of passive income, growth, and saleable asset, we decided to open our own property management business. We got 3 properties by then, by the way. So let me now jump into what those 3 properties look like, so you've got a sense of what that is.
I never knew you were a property manager, Bushy. How? Yeah.
No, well, I'm a bad one, but Sonia is a brilliant one. I'll be honest, I lasted 1 week in the chair in the property management exercise, and being a project manager, and I'd list tasks and I'd power my way through the tasks as a project manager. First day in as a property manager, Sonia went to a conference in Melbourne, so I said, it can't be that hard, I'll look after the fort. I had 110 tasks on my exercise in day 1, and there was nightmare calls. We sort of inherited a pretty bad rent roll. It's about 50 properties with nightmare land tenants and troublesome landlords. If we had known what we're getting into, we would have done it. But I handed it back to her and said, "You can have it. There's no way I'm doing that." And she's done it beautifully. Yeah, one, because we were pretty disappointed in the level of property management we were getting from those that were managing our properties at the time. So I thought, well, Again, ignorance is bliss. If you knew what you knew once you got into it, you'd probably never do it. But
so, what do these deals look like?
Yeah, so let's do the deal. So deal number one was pretty basic because we didn't have much horsepower. So at that time we were working in the city. So we were going to buy the property to live in. That was the initial thinking. And then I bumped into an accountant who slapped me around, and he's still my accountant today, by the way. He's a legend. But he said, you've got limited horsepower. Why are you putting your energy into a home now? Why don't you continue to rent close to the city, which is where you're working, and use your horsepower to put it into a property where the tenant, the tax office and capital growth is going to do the work for you? And he ran the numbers for us. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's a no-brainer. So we ended up buying a property in the beautiful suburb of Aldinga Beach, south of Adelaide. It's become, everyone knows about it now, but no one did then. I mean, it had when we bought this property, it was 1997. It was the highest number of unemployeds lived in Aldinga Park in the state. So that gives you a bit of an idea of what the place was like. It was pretty average then, to be perfectly honest. But it's a cracking. You can drive the car on the beach. I'd holiday down there ever since I was knee-high to a grasshopper, so I knew the place pretty well. And my parents had retired there, so part of the reason that we initially looked at it was, well, it's close enough to mum and dad because their health wasn't too good at the time. But the other thing we realised, and more by mistake than intent, was that they were building an expressway from Adelaide down to not far away from Aldinga Beach. And we sensed that that would really open the place up and values would go through the roof. And that actually proved to be the case. So we picked up the property for 84 grand. It was a 3-bed, one bath place, a corner block, a decent block. It's just a bit over about 1,200 square metres or thereabouts. And it's in the scrub. It's in the nicer part of Aldinga Beach. It's only 150 metres from the beach itself and the ramp down onto the beach. So it was a cracking spot. But the story about acquiring that one was a cracker because there was no internet. There was no way of doing any online research at that stage. We were literally walking the streets, and we saw this place, and we could tell it had been vacant for a fair while. It's like, there's got to be something to that. And it was a nice little place. It was a really nice little place. So my wife, Sonia, being the beaver that she is, she just went through the yellow pages and she found out a name of someone who was attached to the property. And then she just rang everyone in the book and eventually struck the person. And they said, oh, well, I'm not that person, but I know the owner and he's actually in Vietnam. So Sonia got his number, rang him in Vietnam. And he said, well, it's funny you should call, but because I was actually thinking of selling the place. That's, I haven't used it for years. Him and his wife were going to retire on it, but his wife got cancer and died. So I'd had some bad memories for him. So we ended up picking up that property for 84K. We only bought it as joint tenants at that stage because we didn't understand the importance of entities at that point in time. But that property has been an absolute cracker, guys. We've still got it. Yeah, and we did a major reno on it. So we gutted the kitchen, gutted the bathrooms and the wet areas, redid all those. We doubled the footprint of the home. Because, again, with my architectural skills, I could draw it. And my brother-in-law is a chippy. So we spent some time in this worker wealth builder exercise. I actually donned the overalls and the nail bag and was the lackey basically for my brother-in-law as we did the extension. So we re-rendered the place. It's unrecognizable. You just cannot, you wouldn't know it's the same property. It's so completely different. We only spent cumulatively over a couple of stages 130 grand on the progressive renos. That property now is at last valuation is just shy of $1 million. So it's done extremely well for us, and as part of our, and I know I'm bouncing around everywhere here, but in recent times we've converted that into an Airbnb, and because of Sonia's property management skills, she's just doing brilliantly with that property. It's getting really good yield, but we've also got a property because we block it out for us some times of the year where we actually go and enjoy the beach ourselves. So it's got a really good investment returns, but it's a place that we can actually still get to personally enjoy.
What's the occupancy rate for Airbnb, like by the beach in like what for the property? What is it like? Like 80%,
well,
90%?
We've been Airbnb it now for about 9 months. It's been vacant for 1 week.
Oh wow, really?
It's a nice sort of part of the world.
But and I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Sonia has worked really hard to make that happen. She's marketed it like hell. We've decked the place out. We've used our skills to really, the photos. It looks magic. You can have a look at it on the web. It's called Reflections on Airbnb. Check it out. It's a beautiful little property. It's a great place to spend some time. But she's worked really hard. She did a lot of work. It's been going for about 9 months. She spent 9 months before getting it ready. So she did an enormous amount of work so that when we pulled the trigger, that we got some great photography done. The whole thing, we ramped it right up, went out to the database. She's done a lot of activity to make sure. And it's a bit like running a hotel, only it's only a 3-bedroom home. That's how much work. There's a lot of work.
Brisbane's council rates have now gone up to treat Airbnbs like an hotel council rate. So yeah, they're not the only one that thinks so.
Looking at it now, it's amazing.
Well, it needs that sort of work because, and again, I think I saw in the comments in Uga
you
made
got
a
it.
comment about He's got a lot of time for him with his co-living stuff, but he made a comment around how passive is the income, and he's absolutely right. It's not passive income; it's consistent income, but you need to work it, and particularly in that Airbnb space. If you're going to be serious about it, then it does, particularly early on while you're building its reputation, it requires a lot of work. It's not just going whack it on Airbnb and then the money starts rolling in. That ain't the case.
So going back to your freedom number, how did you break it down? Were you like, we need 5 properties, or we need 6 properties, or we need 10 properties?
That's perfect. Perfect. So at that stage, and again, this is back in the late 90s. We were basing it on about 200 grand per property at that stage. Yeah. So in our head, we thought, well, we need 7 properties. Because and this is the other thing, we needed 4 mil, but that was in 15 years' time. So if you roll that back to what we subtracted inflation from that number to work out what is that in today's dollars, effectively, again, with the help of that accountant financial planner. And that meant that we needed, to really get there, we needed to have $1.5 million in assets then. Right off the bat, it's like, holy hell. So, that was like, wow, we've really got to get on our bike here. Yeah. And effectively, that's meant we've had to add more properties to it. Well, again, the number of properties, I think, is biggest dickus, guys, because it's not the number of properties that counts; it's the quality of the properties and the performance of the properties.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Like how you use those properties, right?
Your Aldinga one, right? If you move back 5 stops away from the beach, 600,000, right? You've got $1 million asset because you're all 500 meters away from the beach on a corner block with 1,200 squares. But if you you know what, I'll just settle up here, you're not going to get that.
100%. Spot on. Absolutely spot on. So, I mean, at the time, there was a property around the corner on the Esplanade for 125 grand I just couldn't get enough money to get that property.
Do you look at how much that's worth these days, or you don't?
Yeah, yes. It's over.
Don't do it to yourself. It's not worth it.
No, I've done it. I have done it. Every time when we're down there, I walk past.
$2.5 million, is it? Or?
Kick myself. Yeah, I kick myself. But I just didn't have the horsepower to do that at that stage. So bygones, obviously. That was just
okay. So you've gone and acquired. You've put sweat equity into it as well. So you've manufactured the growth. Then what happened? What's the next kind of acquisition?
Yeah. So initially we didn't do it straight away though. So we bought the property and we put tenants in because I just didn't have the capital to be able to do the renos then. But I knew that it was going to come because it needed it and it had the potential to do that. So we parked that one. The next property, not too long after, this is about 1999, I reckon, we bought Ketch. That was a 322. We picked it up for 190 grand. Again, this is part of the growth exercise. Again, in reflection, this was also in Aldinga Beach. So this is backyard stuff. So it was good in that I knew that area really well.
Yeah.
But I'm starting to concentrate the investment too much. If I did it now, I would be spreading the eggs a bit further. So because I don't want to have them all in one location, that's a danger. So, yep. but with the limited knowledge I had at that point in time, and we'd seen what had been happening to the property, and the expressway was still coming, so we were wanting to get in there before that went through. So we picked up a catch for about 190 grand. So that's a fair bit more than the first one. We bought that as tenants in common, again, because I had some learnings from the accountant then on the benefits of slanting the ownership to improve the cash flow, because cash flow was pretty important to us at that stage of the game. And it was getting about $350 a week, so it's pretty good rent.
Wow, that's amazing, man.
For $19.99, jeez.
For $190,000, you get $350 a week. That's ridiculous.
There weren't many rentals in that area at this point in time. Again, it's a fairly scarce environment because it was traditionally a holiday exercise, so there wasn't
a lot of shacks.
Yeah, you got it. This was a little brick veneer tile roof. It wasn't sexy, but it was a good permanent rental property. Still got that one. That one's about $500K because it's a long way from the beach. It's near the shopping centre. This one, but it's been a reasonable performer. The next property we got in Byron, so we went borderless at this stage, and this was early on the piece of 322, and that was a block that we could subdivide. So I was buying it for its potential then. Again, the property was pretty cheap back when I look back on it now. Man, that was really cheap. It's about 260 grand it cost us at that point in time.
What is that worth now?
I haven't done a recent val, but it's up there. It's up there. It's pretty grunty now. But we actually did carve off the block because it had the potential to subdivide. So that has been a cracker for us as well. We've turned that over. And I'll get to this, but we're into the part of the thing that I realise is that investing in growth property is great for the capital growth, but you're never going to survive off the rent. You're never going to be able to get enough rent. Which a lot of investors think, right, I'll go for growth, I'll just pay off the debt and live off the rent. Well, when you actually do the numbers on that, it doesn't stack. So we fairly, once we got into this journey, we started to realise that this isn't going to be the philosophy. What are we going to do? So it's about transitioning the portfolio and starting to move from growth to cash flow, which I'll talk about shortly. So, but again, that was a pretty good property. We started that's when we started the property management business. So we wanted to get some under our belt while we had the employee income. Because it's much easier to borrow. And remembering here, this is in the days when you could borrow 97% plus lender's mortgage insurance. So it's basically 100% lend, where you were paying for the stamps and the on cost. So we didn't have to have big deposits at this point in time. Can't do it anymore, but we certainly took advantage of it. And that was in the days when the low doc lines were if you had a pulse, you could get money. It was they were virtually giving it away hand over fist. At that stage of the game, very different environment now. There's no question about it. But we started the property management business, and Sonia really got cracking with that. So I was doing this government contract. I'd switched to the worker, and she was the wealth builder at that stage. And then once the property management business got to the point where we're getting enough financials out of it to justify the borrowings, by that time I'd realised how important finance was to the whole equation. So I started a finance broking business with two finance gurus. I knew nothing about finance, guys. I had no clue. And again, if you knew then what I knew now, you'd probably go, why did I do it? But I just knew how important and fundamental the financing was to capacity, to cost and risk, that it was like, if I don't get into this, and again, using that template, the property management business and the broking business, the great thing about broking businesses is you build up a trail income, which creates an income stream, and it's a saleable asset. So it's ticking those three boxes.
Same with the rent roll, right?
Rent roll is exactly the same. So we went completely in green with this, but we associated ourselves with people who were really good at it. So the two guys I went into the broking business were long-term bankers. They were guns. They really knew their stuff. And I just pestered the hell out of them. I said that they brought me on because of my property background, which actually wasn't worth much in the broking space, to be honest, but it became useful later on. But when I joined them, I just said, look, I'm going to hound you to death. I'll ask every question until I understand this and I don't have to ask you anymore. And that's exactly what I did. I was just a pain in the backside. I would just ask and ask. And the way I got through the exercise early on was, if someone asked me a question, I was dealing with a client I didn't know, I said, well, look, I'm going to have to get back to you on that because there's been some change in policy around that area. And then I just go and pester these guys and then ring it back and say, well, this
change in policy.
But a turbocharged.
It's not untrue though.
I had to learn really quick. And because I had the backing of these two guys, and they were exceptional in the space, they really knew their stuff. That was a great learning curve. And it really opened up the arena in terms of opportunity for us as well, because I then knew how to tap into the right sort of structures to be able to secure the ongoing portfolio. And at the same time, what we then did was we built on effectively a project management arm, because we started to recognise how good the new build space was in terms of reduced stamp duty, great depreciation, to look at the cash flow affordability of the properties. Because again, one of these learnings we were getting to was, well, we're going to cap out here because the affordability of being able to hold some of these properties, particularly a couple of the ones that were negatively geared early on, was going to create an issue. So, and given my project management and architectural background, we then built an arm that once we'd done the finance for clients, we would go out and find a block of land and negotiate a fixed build contract, and then would have finishing trades go in and finish the property off for clients who just didn't have the time or knowledge to do it themselves. So that was an additional arm of the business, which leveraged off my skills and enabled us to do that. And as a consequence of that, we did some builds ourselves. So we did a build at Marston. Again, they were just little pocket rockets. So
what, in Queensland?
No, we did one in Queensland, and one in South Australia. So little 422 that they cost about 365 to build, thereabouts.
Back when? I mean,
this was about 2000, just before the GFC, came through.
So that's a lot. Like,
these are
pretty high spec.
They were. We weren't building shit boxes, and we were trying to get into areas that were fairly tightly held, but they had a decent land content. This wasn't the greenfield crap that you see in a lot of these endless subdivisions that go forever. We were trying to be a little bit smart about it and give our clients and ourselves a better product as a result of that. So that was pretty good learnings. Then the next move, and this was a big move for us, the GFC hit, and the world was going to end as we know it. You probably remember the times. I'd been doing a shitload of reading by this stage, and I knew that crises like this were golden, once-in-a-lifetime opportunities. So what do? We jumped on a plane and went to the States. And we spent 3 months over there researching the place. We went up and down the east and west coast. We ended up buying 3 properties over there. I had a self-managed super fund by that stage. So Sonia and I purchased the properties through the self-managed super fund, and we used a really good accountant who structured, and it was a really complicated ownership structure. There was hybrid trusts and corporate entities attached to this thing so that we could separate the US tax regime from the Australian and avoided double tax. And it was.
Did you pretty much have to use cash to buy those as well? Because trying to get a loan, I imagine.
We didn't get a loan. We didn't borrow money. But let's put some perspective around this, guys. We bought a property in Maryland, a property in Washington, and a property in Michigan. They varied from about 30 grand up to about 60 grand in cost. And these properties, these are 2-story, 3-bed, double bath properties with a double garage in a really nice area. So
they didn't buy Detroit, not in Detroit, Michigan.
No. Shit, no. There was nightmares over there. There's people getting killed in that part of the world. But again, on paper, really good. In reality, pain in the backside, because the cold hard reality, the thing that we hadn't really understood, because this is where desktop stuff can get yourself in trouble, is that the quality of the professionalism of the players in the space over there is not a touch on what we enjoy here in Australia. So the number of late night phone calls and whatnot to be talking to property managers and maintenance guys and everything else, it was horrific. We ended up employing an independent project manager over there to be our eyes and ears, to keep an eye on the people who are supposedly looking after our property, to make sure that what they were saying they were doing, they were actually doing. So while the numbers are great, I mean, the rental yields on those properties are around between 25 to 28%. But when you're paying that low amount of money, this is a relative, of course. And the other again, more by good luck than good management, I think, the Australian dollar was $1.04 to the USD at that stage. We've sold these properties during the height of the exercise, beginning of last year. We got rid of them, but because the Forex exchange had built in 20 or 30% of fat right there and then, because the Aussie dollar was back at 70 cents when we offloaded them. So in terms of just the Forex exchange, they've ended up doing all right, but we bought ourselves a late night job with those properties. Again, in retrospect, I wouldn't do it, if I had known what we were getting ourselves into in terms of the time that we needed to spend to do that. But we've come out of it all right, but it needed a fair bit of grunt work to make that happen. So
yeah, I mean, a lot of what I'm hearing is like, this journey is not a passive. We started the show with 200,000 passive income. It's
that's
200,000.
That's why I say passive income is not passive. I call it residual, like passive.
Yeah, it is, and that's exactly right. That's exactly right. I think passive income is a bit of a furphy in reality. I think anything you do, because our investments are as much a business as our businesses are. So the property management business we have, the broking business, and our properties, they're all businesses in their own right. And you should be treating them that way, by the way. They need that level of care to make sure that you're really optimizing the performance. No question.
So, okay. So I guess, in terms of story, I'm just kind of thinking time-wise, it'd be great to get some questions. So if anyone has any questions about what Bushy's story,
there's been a few,
throw them in the comments.
I want to close the story here because just circling back to what I was talking about before, the growing realization as we're going on this journey was that just pouring our money into properties, we were never going to be able to live off the rent. That was just not going to be sufficient to do that. So we started to understand that we needed to rationalize the portfolio, and that's exactly what we've done. So to get in that position where we're now getting much less time-based income from the exercise, we've offloaded got rid of the US properties. That land banking exercise that I spoke about, the vacant dirt,
150 hectares.
Yeah, we sold that progressively. 2021, 22 at the height of the boom. It was like, okay, this is a one-off. We're not going to see times like with that regional access. Everyone wanted to buy big blocks of dirt, so we had 10-hectare lots that we could palm off as hobby farm lots, and great location there on the crest of the hill, looking down the plains there on the edge of Adelaide. So I thought this was a dog when Dad suggested that myself and my brothers get into this. By the way, I was very reluctant. It's been an absolute boon because we sold them off progressively, and it's the sale of that plus a couple of the other properties in the US has enabled us to neutralise the debt, and the properties we've held on to are high yielding, so they're giving us a really good income stream, and we've got the other money sitting in index funds and whatnot that are giving us a good yield as well. So the learnings that I want people to take from that are, yes, you got to go for growth, but you're going to have to convert it to cash flow at some point in time. Now, we were very fortunate again that land that we bought it in 1984. Capital gains tax came in 1985, so we didn't have to pay capital gains tax.
What, on the land?
Yeah.
No, it's because of pre-85 asset. So
exactly. So, and again, that was more by good luck been good management. It just happened to be that was the time that we did that. So that's
been perfect amount of time. I mean, that's got to be hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars of capital gains tax. No, not
millions. Yeah, it would have been. It would have been. So that's been a very fortuitous purchase, and I can't take any great responsibility for that, because it was my father who shoehorned me into doing it reluctantly at the time. But it's proved to be as a legacy piece, effectively, from my dad's advice, that's been a sensational performer, and that's put us in a really good position. So we're sort of in a debt-free situation now, and we, as I think I said to you, Joe, we're taste testing. The gypsy spirit's still alive in what we're doing. We're actually living on the Bellarine Peninsula where we are. We're taste testing this opportunity before we decide where we're going to live. We spent some time on the Mornings Peninsula. We've spent some time in Northwest Tassie, and we're probably going to spend
Northwest Tassie.
Yeah.
But nothing in Northwest Tassie.
Have you been there? It's beautiful.
I do. For a year.
I'm a country boy. Remember, I'm a country boy, so I love the cold. I've got a dodgy thyroid, so I can't do humidity or heat.
Oh, I hate the cold.
I love the cold. I'm one of those oddbods who loves to rug up. So we're in the privileged position now where we're able to taste test different locations, because, as you repeatedly say, Joe, it's boots on the ground that really tells you how good a location is. We've done our desktop research and said, well, these look good. Let's actually spend some time living there, and once we've confident around the spot we actually want to enjoy, then we're actually going to get the forever home for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
So that's the end of the journey.
That's a bloody wild ride, that's for sure. So many.
I feel like we could have. This could have been our 4-hour session or something, Joe. It's just I feel like we've shortcutted the back part of the story, but that's okay.
Yeah.
So well, I guess this is super interesting because it took so long, and it's just kind of a proof. Because I speak to people that have I've got a client right now, and they've got 15 properties, and it's like, holy crap, you're at this position, and then I wind back and they're like, but that's over 15 years. We've been doing this, and then we build up kind of plans, and it's like, oh, people have 5 properties. They're like, but it's been over 7 years to get to this point. And it's cool because you can start to map it out and say, oh, well, you're actually in 5 years, you'll look here. And it's like, well, that's where they are. And then in 15 years, it's like, well, that's where these guys are. So you can you can do it. You just be very conservative with your numbers, and you can make it happen. What's this comment?
I just wanted to bring this up because somebody said, Yasmin said, she said it's exhausting. Tim's question, and she said it's not the will I'm lacking, but I know that I'm not an architect nor handyman. Would like to know slow build. Must admit, kudos to him. So I would say though, Yasmin, this has happened over 30 years, hasn't it, Bushy? This is
So we started in. Yeah, so we started our journey at the AD portion of our journey. We started in
mid-90s.
Yeah, mid-90s. So what are we now? What's that? 96. Yeah, it's getting on
20,
towards
20 odd years, 25.
Yeah. And that is a couple of the key take-home messages here, I think, that because we've made this has become our life. So we've put energy into all of this. All of the stuff we're doing business-wise is still around the whole property piece. And the one thing that I would say to people is that if you don't know the knowledge, and if you're using those 3, the template of residual income, growing value, and resaleable asset, just because you haven't done something doesn't mean that you can't do it. You just need to surround yourself with people, or as you said earlier, Joe, make sure you're rubbing shoulders with independent professionals in each of the key positions that can help you do it for you and teach you along the way.
Yeah, because I'd want to hit on some of this stuff that you've said here, Yasmin. I'm not an architect nor a handyman. That's a bit of a limiting belief around Well, you don't. I'm not an architect. I'm not a Jeff. Have you ever picked up a hammer?
I did when I was free, and I whacked myself on the head. So I haven't picked up one since. I ended up with.
You don't need to have those type of skills. And I think Bushy, you were on the session. We're talking about value add last week at the Geelong live event, and a lot of it was you just have professional teams like you. Like I'm doing a renovation right now, and we need flooring, we need a new air conditioner, we need to paint it, we need to do all this stuff to it. It's going to cost $15,000, but all that is 5 trades that are going to come in. One's going to come in and do this. One's going to do this. Then that one's going to paint it, and then it's like that's it. I didn't pick up anything. You don't have to be an expert at it.
The architect thing, I think, has actually been more of a hamstring than a help, to be honest, because if you look at that first venture into the property game, that was a disaster because I thought I knew it as an architect. I've virtually had to pull my heart out as an architect, as a property investor, because it's about the numbers, not about how good the property looks, which is what architecture is generally about. Our ventures into property management and finance broking, I knew nothing. But the thing that I was keen to do is learn from good people. So we built both of those businesses by hard graft, but also rubbing shoulders with really good players in each of those spaces. And both Sonia and I are not scared to ask questions. You've seen me in action, Joe. You've sat on the Get Invested in the Realty Talk exercise, and I would just ask away, because if I ask enough questions, I'm going to get the answers I need, and then if I can't do it, I'll find someone who can.
Exactly what Jen Lee's saying here is, with the internet, YouTube today, anyone can access free education. Anyone could become a handyman, a designer through self-education. It's an awesome point.
Having said that, before you get to this comment, I just want to say thanks for raising it, Yasmin, because it's the kind of thing that everybody's thinking. Like it's the, I mean, I don't know if it's the elephant in the room, but it's kind of because it's like, oh great, Bushy's an architect, he's a handyman, he's all this, or handy woman, whoever, but it's like, oh, I can't do that. It's these people, and I think and anybody can, like even Joe and I, like we've been going to these seminars, or I've been going to property seminars since the early 2010s, and when I first went to them, I thought the same thing. I was like, I can't. These people are all like high, way above me. It's and over time you just start to put the Lego blocks together. Don't want to win
property investors don't win architectural awards.
They don't. They don't want to win.
That's a great comment. If you've won an architectural award, you've done something wrong as an investor. I can tell you right now.
That's good. That's good. Well, let's get to some more of these comments. I am just cautious of wanting to cut it off at 2 hours.
Do you want to go to sleep? Given inflation is higher, interest rates are higher, best advice to go through serviceability, which most are facing. Income.
Yeah, so I want to tackle this from a few different aspects, I guess, because it's fair to say that a lot of people that we get to see, particularly from the financing perspective, and the financing piece is a major component of your capacity. There's no question about it. We get to see a lot of people who are structured the wrong way. They've generally got their portfolio with one bank, and that's a major problem for a number of reasons, which we probably haven't got time to go into right now. But we had our portfolio spread across a bunch of banks, all standalone. There are banks out there right now. Everyone keeps going on about the 3% buffer and that they get being serviced at 9 or 10%. Well, if you dig hard, there are still banks that don't have the buffer on it. You can lock in if your need is to get into a property. There are banks that will offer you fixed rates that are still in the 5s and don't put a buffer on top. They're giving you a much better capacity than just sticking with the majors and sticking it all under one hat.
And the rate as well isn't ridiculously high. Like you don't have to necessarily pay 10% for those kind of second or third tier.
No, well, there's one lender that I know of. I was talking to my broking team today, saying, "Hey, I'm talking tonight. Bring me up to speed." Well, I know there's a lender that you can get at 5.67%, no 3% buffer. They'll also take on all of the variable income bonuses, overtime, which a lot of the major banks won't. So there are options out there to still optimize your opportunity. One of the things I want to touch on, and there's a word of caution around this as well, because I'm hearing a lot of there's some accountants and some other players that are shouting from the rooftops the idea of pursuing special purpose vehicles and independent trusts on for those people who want to basically create unlimited borrowing capacity. There are some precautions that I will suggest around that, because yes, you can do it. Yes, you can set up a scenario where, providing a property is totally positive cash flow, and that means that after all costs, that the trust itself is in a positive cash flow position. Then because if it's in a trust or a company, it falls outside of the normal consumer credit code.
NCCP, yeah, national.
Yeah. Then you have the potential ability to be able to then leverage up your borrowing capacity. But I want to caution, because just because you can do it doesn't necessarily mean you should do it. And why do I say that? Because unless you're doing worst case scenarios around this exercise, and we mightn't be at worst case yet, we don't know, and that goes belly up, you could significantly put yourself in financial danger. So there's a word of caution for me around that, because there's a reason why. Well, I think it's gone too far with a 3% buffer. There's a reason why there is some scrutiny around borrowing at the moment, because the government doesn't want people to overextend and put themselves in a dangerous position. So, if we had the worst case scenario and we had a GFC on our hands that occurred in the States, and it's very unlikely to happen, but my approach to life is plan for the worst and then expect the best, and you're going to be okay. Then those avenues are out there. I'm happy to talk to people about their specific situation, or my broking team can talk to them about that situation to see whether that's a fit for them. But we will be putting some scrutiny around that, because, as I say, just because you can doesn't mean you should. So that there are avenues around that piece. And then beyond that, in terms of the exercise, one of the questions that I often ask investors, if they're really extended to the max, then and depending on the size of their portfolio, there's a question mark to me around the performance of the quality of the properties they've already got. So sometimes, if you do a cost-benefit analysis on the performance of a property, and they might have a property in the portfolio, but it's actually, from an opportunity cost perspective, it's dragging them down.
Yeah,
then it's a good time to have
that borrowing capacity.
It's time to have a really good look and see, well, is this the property I actually want to hold for the next 15 years? Is it ticking all the boxes in terms of the ongoing growth opportunity? Because let's be honest, guys, given what's happened with the property boom that happened post-COVID, there are a lot of areas around the country, given the tide floated all ships, that aren't likely to see much growth in the short to medium term, because we've brought forward anywhere between 3 to 6 years worth of capital growth. So unless a property in a location is experiencing new growth drivers in terms of new infrastructure, new industry, and strong and growing incomes, then a lot of properties are going to flatline for a considerable period of time. So I think a big part of the focus at the moment needs to be on having a really good look at the quality of your actually existing portfolio to make sure you've got top performers in there. And if you don't have the capacity to take it much further, then it might be an opportunity to turn some of that stuff over to put it into something that's going to perform better.
What sort of questions how do you assess whether something's a top performer or not?
Yeah, okay, good. So all comes back to strategy. So the approach we do is we'll look at an individual's freedom numbers, and again, we can run the freedom forecast for clients to get them a bit of a roadmap. And once we understand what the timeline is and what the goalposts are as found as the equity growth, then once we start to analyse properties, most people are in the growth phase of their exercise. Then we would normally suggest doing what we call a top-down macro, micro, micro analysis of that area, and that area, as you guys would know, a big chunk of the growth comes from the location, not from the specific property itself. So we're looking for leading indicators of future growth in that spot, and a lot of that information is serviced from council and government websites to look at committed infrastructure that's going into it, committed new industries that are going to happen in that location, so that we're looking at a location in terms of what it's got to look like in 10 to 15 years' time, not what it looks like now.
Yeah, and also proposed does not mean it's going to come. There are some councils that propose all these amazing, spectacular deals and this new thing on the water and this new thing here and this new thing here. And then you like, oh, this has been proposed for 10 years now. Oh, okay. Oh, this one's 7 years. This one's 6 years. Oh, so it's not coming, is it? No, it's not. It's not coming.
Spot on. And I got to emphasise committed infrastructure. It must be committed if you're going to be serious. Not a politician making an announcement to try and win some votes.
There was a great question about oh no, sorry, Jeff. There was one about this day and age. It was about like
I got it. Yeah.
How do we compare from the 1980s era where the average mortgage is less than 200K with 10% interest rates? Properties used to double in 7 years if you bought properly, whereas now the average mortgage is 700K with 5% interest rate. Properties will double in 13 to 15 years, or shall we say the baby boomers had the best time in their life and live with the facts?
Well,
what are your thoughts on all of that?
If you bought in some places in 2020, you could have doubled. My property could have doubled in 2 or 3 years, but that also hadn't seen growth in 7 or 8 years though. So,
yeah. That's an interesting comment because I always think that looking back's okay, but we've got to play the hand that we've been dealt, and there are still ways of doing it. We've just got to. While it was probably, and it was, if I look back on some of my journey, back in the days when I could get 97% lend plus LMI, that was pretty easy exercise in terms of being able to secure the property because I didn't need much equity. But we just need to be more creative now, and there's ways of doing it. And I think the underlying comment from what that member said is I think they're right. I think it is a 15-year journey. I've done my own maths on this. So if you're going in expecting to get amazing results in under 15 years, you're probably kidding yourself. You might get lucky. We might have a pandemic where what happened in the pandemic is the second time in the 230-year history of the country that we saw property values rise so much across the board. We saw anywhere between 20 to 50% increases in values over that time, and that's only the second time it's ever happened in Australia. So yeah,
I mean, this is the property market's just like the share market. You put money into it, it's going to grow. The government printed billions of dollars, which flowed through of people's bank accounts into the property market. So it is, of course, going to go up. And this is where everyone's getting. Well, I think where everyone should be a little bit more precautious of where they're buying. Everything is not going to rise like it did. So be very careful of the areas that you're investing in. Make sure that the fundamentals are still there, because actually this is coming up to a great question that Jonty put on. In case of diversification, is it better to spread the portfolio even if you think the fundamentals of the second area are not as strong as the first area that you've already invested in? What are your kind of thoughts to that?
Yeah, okay. That's a really good question, Josh. And again, my response to that will be depends where you're at on your journey. So my feeling is early on, if the spot is an absolute crackerjack and you're not exceeding the land tax threshold, so you're going to get whacked by that, then early on in your portfolio, then having that concentration, providing you're really confident around the performance of that ongoing, then why not? Once your portfolio starts to grow, though, for land tax and the cross correlation benefits of spreading it across a wider audience into different states with different exercises, I think it's a safer way to protect your portfolio. So again, I don't think there's any hard rules with any of this. It's about what is appropriate to that particular investor's portfolio based on their goals at that particular point in time.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Because, for example, if somebody says, "Oh, look, I bought a property in Sydney in what 2010 or 2012, whatever," and they paid, I don't know, like $500,000. Now to say, "Oh, look, getting around to buying their third or fourth property, going to buy in that same area in Sydney, you're going to have to drop $1 million or just a touch over $1 million," or just like, is that really not rational, but is that the best decision to it? And the yield's probably 3.5%, maybe.
Yeah, and nothing is harder than going to an area and buying it in the 300s to then go back and buy it at the 700s. Like, nothing's harder. But my answer to that question is, especially for first-time investors, you put so much time, energy, effort, resources, if you're doing this by yourself, into an area, and you're so confident, you know that this area is going to do incredibly well. Don't buy one, buy two, buy three, but just don't put your entire portfolio in that area, because you've done the hard work. And then what will happen is you're like, oh God, I've now got to go ahead and do all that energy, resources into, Townsville or Wodonga or wherever the hell it's going to be. And it's like, well, no, you already know this is a good area. Go ahead and do it. And what you'll start to see, like, it's be in an area and deals will come up. Like that's it. It's just, it's just, where is that? Is that a deal? Yep, that's a deal. I know it's a deal. Boom, jump on that one. Go another one. Yeah. If it's a good area.
You look at sort of, you spend 100 hours on looking at properties, and you're like, you basically know what the value of the area should be. And then if something's a little bit cheaper, then your ears will prick up and say, well, okay, what's actually wrong with this? Or there's nothing wrong with it. They just need to sell. Maybe. Yeah. If there is something wrong with it, then maybe look again. But, yeah.
No, it's a good call. It'll get to the point where it's almost intuitive. I mean, I call it property porn. I'm scrolling through a property every day, domain and real estate. Yeah. I enjoy it. It's fun. I
wait for the new listings to come online. It's a little scary. I think I have a problem. Property.
Okay, well let's. I think we should end on this question, because I feel like it might be a bit of a curly one that might go on for a little bit. But Bushy, if you were to restart again today in today's environment, so let's go back to architect Bushy back in the day. You're starting all over again. You're 33 years old. What would you do? How would you kind of start this journey and this process?
It wouldn't be a whole lot different, to be perfectly honest, because, again, the reason why I wanted to talk about the holistic overall journey in terms of what we're doing personally, professionally, and property-wise is that they are all interrelated. So part of our decision-making wasn't all property-based. It was, right, we need to get really good incomes to be able to have the horsepower to stick into the property. So they weren't totally separate decisions. What we did at that point, like I come out of architecture, went into the executive contracting arena because I knew there was good coin in that, so that coin could then feed my portfolio. So I think you need to look at this as an overall exercise, not just put property out to one side and then ignore the rest and just keep doing what you're doing. If you need to change your job and you need to change your occupation and your career, then the only thing stopping you from doing that is the knowledge and taking the action to make that happen. And the decisions we made around jumping into professions that we knew nothing about, but we were going to run hard and run early. And believe you me, we worked damn hard early to get our skills up so that we could horsepower the exercise is a key part. So easy for me to sit here and say that now, by the way, because I've been through all that pain. But I do encourage people to, if you're
serious, in all here. It's in this little. It's
the Bible. Yeah, exactly right.
The thickness.
It's a slab. It's got thud value, mate. There's no doubt about it. But so I encourage people to really look holistically. If you're serious about really putting yourself in a position where you're going to generate an income stream that allows you to do and live the way you want, then don't separate what you do from what you invest in, because they all need to come together as part of the overall plan.
Yeah, that's great advice. I see a lot of people doing that where they're like, well, no, I'm just going to work, do an Uber and I'm going to do these little side hustles. It's like, yeah, but that doesn't fundamentally solve the challenge. Like getting that extra bit of income isn't actually going to help your serviceability as much, because you got to do it for a number of years. Like, starting a new business, right? I'm going to start this new business. Well, that means you can't borrow for 2 years. So you need to factor in your entire life. I saw someone someone posted in the group was like, hey, should I work these 2 side hustles because I'm going to make more money, but I'm not really going to learn and get any more skills? Or should I focus in on this one skill so I can get better? And, after writing it, he pretty much realized himself, why would I be doing 2 shit jobs when I could be doing 1 good job and building upon my skills to be able to build out my wealth and empire.
And I know I've said this a number of times, but if you're serious about financial freedom, then everything you do should be built around those 3 key principles, and that is get into something that's going to give you a residual income and an asset that's growing in value that you can eventually sell. And that applies as much to the physical assets as well as what you're doing as an occupation. So that part of the big drivers for Sonia and I to start a property management business from scratch and not knowing what we're doing, and a finance broking business, because they tick those boxes. And we knew that they were all complementing our skills and knowledge of how property works, so we could in turn then do it better.
Yeah, 100%. I
want to answer this
one. Last question.
I got it during the ad break, Brian.
Question: when does Jeff Miles get a fresh stubby from the fridge? You've just been sipping it on extremely long. He's got a massive case there. And he just pops a new one in every time.
Yeah. But I suppose I wanted to because it's great to interested in your I sort of think that whilst financial freedom is probably imperative, you need to absolutely commit to it. I think you need to enjoy it, because if you're just solely focused and at the detriment of everything else, I think you're going to get there and you're going to be at the mountaintop and you're going to be lonely. So I think it's important to still nurture your health and your family, your friends as well. Otherwise, you're gonna get. Yeah, sorry, go.
No, you make a really good point, Jeff. It's taken me a long time to realize this, but I think sustainable success lies at the intersection of self, health, and wealth. And self is what's between our ears and how we think, our outlook, approaches, and expectations. Our health is the daily disciplines and happy habits that we develop. And if you've got both of those 2 right and they're balanced, then you'll achieve the wealth that you're looking for. But if you just go for wealth at the expense of your mental health and your physical health, then it ain't going to be a very enjoyable ride. What was that comment there, Joe?
He said, Bushy, you can come back to I was probably Investor's first ever 24-hour live session.
We can do a charity session.
It's like the treadmill race where people do it.
I hope I haven't bored them to death. So, because as you can tell, I'm very passionate about this subject.
Definitely not.
I'm very keen to help as many people as I can to enjoy the exercise, because it's there in front of us and anyone can do this.
Mm-hmm.
It's the whole reason I sort of took on Joe's challenge to start this group 3 years ago to sort of, because I knew it was going to be an undertaking. So, but no, I think it's great to be able to get that message out there and hopefully help some people.
So, yeah. Bushy, how can we learn more about you, mate? Like, how do we get more Bushy in our lives? How do we get Bushy in our earballs as well?
Well, 3 simple ways, because education is the entry point to everything. So just like the great information you guys share, if you Google search the Property Hub, then I host the Realty Talk Show, which the living legend Kevin Turner has been running for about 15 years, and just every living legend in the property space has come onto that show. So there's some brilliant learnings that come out of that. And you'll also, bushymartin.com.au, jump on there and you'll see the podcast run. The other thing that would be worth diving into, if you're not a reader, and let's face it, the Freedom Formula is a bit of a slab. I've condensed my lifetime's work into that. But to make it easy for those who want to stick it in their earbuds, we've also created the Property Wealth Bootcamp, which is a free podcast series. Again, knowhowproperty.com.au/property wealth. If you plug that in, there's a 7-part series there that goes through in a bit more detail the stuff that I've actually covered off tonight. So I can put a meat around the exercise as far as that goes. So I've just downloaded all that for people who just physically can't sit down and read a book. So take advantage of that exercise is the key thing. And if there's those that just want to look at their own freedom forecast or to look at alternative avenues in terms of increasing their capacity, then I'm very biased. But the investment savvy mortgage brokers we have on the team are second to none. So the Know How Property team, if you just reach out and have a chat, then we can start to put some shape around that if that's of any use to you.
Love that.
Yeah, Stuart said, this is Stuart. Stuart was at last Wednesday's event as well.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Stuart. Great to see you again,
Stuart Goring.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Love it. Well, mate, this has been an unreal session. Thank you very much, Bushy. Always amazing frameworks. And it's cool to unpack your story as well. I actually learned a lot through it. And it's just keep doing it, right? Like it's just keep plugging along and doing the right thing, building the right team, and making the smart choices, and you'll get there.
Remember that quote at the start? That ends the old Warren Buffett's. I'm a big fan. Wealth is a transfer of money from the impatient to the patient. So just stick at it. It's not going to happen quickly. Property is a get rich slow, wealth by stealth approach. So do that. And again, full marks to everything you guys are doing. You've created a fantastic community, guys. Anything that I can do at any time to help you, you yell out. Very keen to get the message out there. And I can't wait to get you on the podcast, Jeff.
Oh. Good luck getting Jeff on a podcast.
I have been on a couple. I do go on them. I don't know. I'm already busy enough, and I just feel that if I go on these things, people are going to. I feel bad when I can't respond to people. So that's why I'm reluctant.
Well, I can make it easy for you. I can give you all the questions, and you can prepare it so you're never put on the spot, mate.
Oh no, I don't worry about that. I'll answer pretty much most questions. It's just more about actually then people saying, "Oh, I've seen Jeff on an interview. I got to send a message," and yeah, here we go. Everybody, the love is coming in, and I'm glad I did not watch Origin. New South Wales getting belted. How bad are we?
Who won the game? Is it over? We know the Maroons or the Blues?
20-0 up at halftime. Absolutely.
20-0 up. Oh god.
Yeah.
It's
a
slaughter.
Disgrace.
We get the cricket and then we don't get the football.
Let's go and request that beer then, guys.
Let's go buy a property. See you guys later.
See you guys. Thanks.